Welcome back to Around the Cauldron, where we talk theology, philosophy, and everyday life as a modern witch. Today's episode was a special request from my patrons over on Patreon, so a special thank you to all of my patrons who helped make this show possible. Thank you to Rose, Jess, Lee, Angie, Leli, Magical Crafting, Bliss, Beverly Butterfly, Jessica, Jennifer, Laura, Chris, Nad, and Brittany. If you would like to be part of that list and help support the show, feel free to join me over on Patreon and get some other patron-exclusive perks. Today, I want to talk about the occult community, why community is important, and how community means so many things to so many different people. First, though, let's go over our monthly forecast. Alright, so to reiterate from last month's episode, we just got out of Mercury retrograde. Now that it's over, communication should get a lot easier and you should have a better time making larger decisions and speaking clearly. Any issues with technology may also start to relax too. Just because the retrograde is over doesn't mean you shouldn't think before you speak though. That's always good advice. We'll be moving through the new moon on July 8th and 9th with the dark moon on the 10th. Then we move through a full moon in Aquarius on July 23rd and 24th. I wanted to include some other fun festivals and holidays in this section too, because not everyone is from the United States and not everyone cares about the moon phases. So, according to nationaltoday.com, here are some cool things happening in July. Canada Day is on July 1st. International Plastic Bag Free Day is on July 3rd. The United States Independence Day is on July 4th. National Kitten Day is on July 10th. National Moon Day is on July 20th. For my Discord friends, July 22nd is Selena Gomez's birthday. It's okay if you don't get why this one's included. And then Eid al-Adha is on July 31st. I really hope I didn't mispronounce that. I did practice that before I said it. If you're celebrating a festival, holiday, Sabbath, or birthday this month, then I wish you well. Now on to the topic. Community is important. There. That's it. That's the show. Goodbye. Of course, I'm kidding. I mean, the basic premise of the show today is that community is important, but I really want to talk about different reasons why community is important, what community means to other people, and how it can help or hinder your occult practices. I'm also going to talk about things that you should look out for when in occult communities, different red flags, and certain times when maybe you should step away from a specific community. Now, I'm going to be speaking specifically about the occult community today, but I'll probably use the witchcraft community as a general example because it's one that I'm an active participant in. But this episode could probably be applied to literally any place ever, probably. So, what's the occult community? First, we need to define what I mean when I say the word community. In this context, and probably many other contexts, community is just a group of people who usually have similar interests or things in common. It can be used in a broad sense to cover a wide array of people. For example, my city would be considered a community. We all live here. We all have a vested interest in maintaining the community for ourselves and others. It doesn't mean that we all believe or live the same, just that we all live in the same common area, and that first part's kind of important. In a more specific case, we have smaller communities that are built around common interests, ideas, beliefs, and practices. This would be the witchcraft community, where we all have a common interest, belief in, or practice of witchcraft. It can be the queer community. Hello, that's also me as a pansexual person. Or even the writing community or YouTube community. Within the occult community, there are smaller communities. I'm going to call them sub-communities for the sake of being easy to understand. So the wider occult community encompasses any other sub-community within it. Just to clarify, occult here means anything spiritual, supernatural, outside the norm, or quote-unquote hidden, as is the common definition. Witchcraft is occult. Tarot is occult. Ceremonial magic is occult. Astrology can be occult. Paganism and polytheism aren't necessarily occult, but I'm going to put them here because it's been my experience that we all tend to just mix together. If that's not you, that's okay. And if you really want to get down to a micro level, each community and sub-community also has their own communities and cliques. I think it's just human nature, honestly. We find the people we click with, the people we have common interests with, and we just go together. Now, sometimes this doesn't always work, especially if there are strong personalities involved, massive differences in beliefs and values, and just general politics that will eventually happen when you get groups of people together. So what's the purpose of community? Why is community important, especially in occult spaces? I have a few different reasons why I think we should be cultivating community, and then I actually asked in Discord and on Twitter for your opinions. So let's talk about my opinions first. It's my podcast, I do what I want. So one of the first things that I think community is important for is socialization and a sense of belonging. This is especially true when we talk about occult spaces because we are generally outside what society would consider quote-unquote normal. And to go into a shared space in a society and be on the fringe, you don't really always feel like you belong. So having that community that you can go to and be open about yourself and open about what you're doing or why you're buying those flowers or why you've cut that lemon in half or why you added just a little bit extra sugar to your recipe than what it called for and not be judged for it is important. And this leads into the next two that I have, which is friendship and general support. If I go to my daughter's friends' parents and I start talking about Sabbath celebrations or rituals or spell ideas or even the fact that I have a YouTube channel and a podcast, chances are I'm going to get looked at funny and, I don't really know how that's going to go. I don't expect general support from the wider community as a whole, society in general. And it's really nice to have that community to fall back on where we can be ourselves and we can talk about our regular lives, but also our lives and our practices within any of the occult things that we're interested in or that we do. I have made so many friends online in these communities that, it would take me forever, that it would take me years to visit each and every one of you that I have made friends with. I have friends all over the world and people that I consider really close friends. And it does cultivate that sense of belonging where you have these people that you can talk to and people that you get along with and people to share ideas with that aren't going to judge you. Or if they do judge you, they're going to be quiet about it because most communities, in my experience, have, some semblance of not my practice, so I don't get to have an opinion on it. Obviously, that has some caveats to it, and that's going to vary, but that's been my experience. So, community, in a sense, is just good for socialization, that sense of belonging, making friends, and getting support from like-minded people. Obviously, you can get this anywhere, but I think it's especially important in occult spaces when we are on the outside and we do have practices and things that, depending on where you are in the world, will be considered fringe practices or things that aren't necessarily what society considers normal or weird, or, you might even be vilified by society and outcast. And we don't want that. It's human nature to want to fit in and be part of the crowd. because historically, if you were outcast, the chances of your survival were slim. However, we don't necessarily have that anymore. Where I am anyway, obviously I'm speaking from my own experience. But having that support where I can just pop into Discord and be like, hey, this is going on. Can I have your opinion? I think that's really helpful. Then there's also some things that community is good for that aren't necessarily all positive. The next one that I have here on my list is protection of the entire community, and not just the people, but of the values that we uphold. If you are in any online space, you've probably seen this. People arguing back and forth about beliefs and values, and people being up in arms about racism and fascism and homophobia and hatred. That is a big purpose of community, in my opinion. We want to keep our community safe and uphold the values that we hold dear as a community in general. And these values are going to be things like, acceptance and inclusivity, and depending on the community, being educational and creating space for people to learn. I want to plug my blog post that I wrote, actually, talking about how I am a gatekeeper. I am the gatekeeper of my community because it's important to me to make sure that everyone that's in my community feels safe and feels included. And I don't want people in my community who are racist or homophobic or transphobic or who deny science, or, we don't deny science here in my spaces. That's just not something that happens, and I don't allow it to happen in my communities. So I recommend reading that blog post. It was inspired by a tweet by J. Alan Cross, actually. So that link is going to be in the show notes. I definitely recommend that you read it. But community upholds the values. And you can see this even in wider spaces, like cities and even states, where people vote on things. Then the majority rules, and it doesn't always work in everybody's favor. Actually, here in the United States, it hardly ever works in everybody's favor. However, that's an example of community and the majority of the community upholding the values that they hold dear and that they value, that they think are important. Community is also good for accountability. And this is why we should have a well-rounded community as a whole. I don't think that we should have people separating themselves into subcategories or subcommunities and never really interacting with everyone else. That's not a well-rounded community, and you can end up pigeonholing yourself into specific beliefs and practices without really understanding what else is out there. It also can lead to radicalization of your beliefs, which is an entirely different episode and an entirely different topic. However, having a well-rounded community is important because it brings you new perspectives, but it also brings you accountability. Say, for example, I made a mistake. I messed up. I used a term that has bad connotations or that I should not be using online in some space without knowing. And someone comes to me and they say, hey, Megan, you kind of messed up here and we don't say this and this is why we don't say this. And then I can turn around and be like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me make this correction and make a public post about it. Say, it's brought to my attention that I said X and Y and I did not know X and Y was bad for whatever reason, etc. We need to be able to cultivate a community of accountability where people feel okay coming to me or coming to someone else and saying, hey, you kind of messed up. Here's why you messed up. Let me give you some resources, or let me point you in the direction of someone else who has resources, and let's make this better and make this a learning experience. Accountability is extremely important in our communities because there is so much room for error, and it's so easy for some people to go from one side to completely radicalize their beliefs and turn into something that we do not want in our communities, like a massive racist or a fascist. We don't want that. So being able to hold these people accountable, anybody in the community, not just leaders or people that have large followings or even groups and organizations, as a community, being able to hold everyone to the same standards and hold everyone accountable for the things that they say and the things that they do is extremely important. This also goes into checks and balances, which helps keep the community cohesive, and it makes sure that no one gets too big for their britches, so to speak. I always say, I think I've said it. If I haven't said it, I've thought it at least, that just because someone has a large following doesn't mean they know what they're talking about, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to be right all the time. It doesn't mean that everybody should follow them and do what they say. A well-balanced community can look at someone's following and not care, not look at it, because what we need to be looking at is the person and what they're saying and what they're doing. And then going back to that accountability, if the person has a large following, then maybe making it known in the community in general, hey, this person is doing X and Y. Maybe let's watch out for that. But first, before that even happens, we need to go back to that accountability thing, I think, and maybe try to talk to that person privately, because maybe they don't know. And, trying to have a conversation with them and see where that goes. So accountability and checks and balances in general are what community is good for, because it makes sure that everybody is on the same page. It makes sure that we don't have people who are just massively blowing up on social media, spitting out nonsense and saying, it's totally cool for everybody everywhere to use white sage, or it's totally cool for anybody to practice voodoo no matter what. Those are the kinds of things that community in general will watch out for to protect other people in the community and even new people that are coming into the community who don't know any better. And then community is also good for getting new perspectives. Before I was online, before I joined any sort of community or social media with the specific intention of learning more about witchcraft or Irish paganism or any other sort of spiritual practice, the only perspective I had was my own, the people that I talked to in real life that had similar interests, and from the books that I was reading. Since joining community, my perspectives have been entirely shifted, and I have learned so many different things from so many different people who are online, sharing their experiences, talking about their practices, and answering questions. And going back to having a well-rounded community, this is extremely important. And it's something, I don't know how many times I have said well-rounded, but it's important, because if you are stuck in just one belief system with one perspective, you're missing out on a lot. And new perspectives are important, not just for learning how to do new practices, but it really opens you up to the nuance of witchcraft and other pagan and polytheistic beliefs, but also any other sort of occult practice. That's another thing that I didn't have on my list, and it can go along with new perspectives, that's fine, is nuance. Community provides nuanced conversations, and this is because you have so many people that are coming together from so many different walks of life who have so many different experiences that may be able to provide a new perspective on an issue that you were either on the fence about or hear me out, you're open-minded, because I think everybody should be open-minded, and you get new information, and then you realize that maybe your perspective needs to change and grow with the new information that you learned. I hope all of that made sense and that you understand kind of where I'm coming from with why community is important. I'm the kind of person who enjoys smaller communities, more close-knit communities, not necessarily because everybody believes the same, because trust me, in my Discord server, I don't even have like 100 people in my Discord server right now, and we don't all think the same, and we do have some pretty good discussions in there sometimes. I'm in Ari the Oak Witch's Discord, and the same thing over there too. It's a smaller community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we all think the same. I prefer smaller communities just because then it's easier for everyone's voice to be heard. Plus, I also have social anxiety, and being in a large group of people really terrifies me. So I do like to keep my own specific community smaller, and I do like to be part of smaller communities. But I'm also part of larger communities, but I'm more of a lurker. And I don't always hop into conversations. But these are just some of the reasons why I think community in the occult is important, and why we should be cultivating a sense of community, but also keeping very specific things in mind for what we need in our community, and what we want in our community, and what is currently allowed in our community. Instead of answering a listener question this week, I asked the question and got answers from listeners. On Twitter and in my Discord server, I asked why community is important to you and what you think the purpose of community is in occult spaces. Here are a few answers that I got. Now from Discord, the names are taken out for privacy reasons because you have to join my Discord server and agree to the rules and everything there, and it's just more private. But here are a few answers that I got from Discord. Community is important for pretty prosaic reasons, like the sharing of information, training little witchlets, and so on. But let's be real. Most of us are working without the benefit of a magical group in real life, and when we have experiences that are outside the norm, it's very helpful to have people that we can talk to about them. That's true whether we need someone to point out that we're going overboard, or to just tell us, no, that is really weird and you should probably cleanse your everything. Community is great because it allows us a way to bounce ideas off each other and learn from people in different pathways. There is so much stuff I would never have been exposed to without the online community, and I think that capacity for sharing knowledge and experience is wonderful. I also like having like-minded people that I can just hang out with. It makes a difference to not being sure how much to share about your practice, even in a completely conversational way, because you never know how someone outside the community will take it. But within the community, you can just be chatting about baking, for example, and it's not weird to just throw in oh, and I put in some sugar too to sweeten this conversation I'm expecting to have. Similar to what others have said, I just like to have the support of people who are having similar experiences to me. Also, where I can learn from other people. I hadn't been in any online communities for almost 10 years before last year, including following creators on YouTube. I really increased my knowledge tremendously. Books just aren't the same as someone discussing real-life experiences. And then from Twitter, Alex said this: community is growth through exchange and mutual learning. It's important because it also provides a safer space and a place free of judgment. I hope that community's goal is to help each other grow and discover new practices. An occult path is never traveled entirely alone for me. Then Kat Borealis of the Borealis Meditation Podcast had this to say: community is a support system that I feel has always been virally important for humans. It's a group of people who you can lean on and who can lean on you. Communities tend to form around a common goal or interest. Religious communities look after not only your physical well-being, but however you want to call it, spiritual, emotional, mental well-being. In the occult, we tend to be on the outside of more traditional societal communities when it comes to religions or spiritual practice, so forming our own is vitally important for our well-being. So if communities are supposed to be all great, helpful, and protective, aren't they always? No, they're actually not always helpful, supportive, protective, or any of that. Humans are still humans, and we are not perfect creatures. When I'm looking at communities and interactions with others, there are a few things that are big red flags for me, and these things will pretty much make me back away, sometimes quietly, and just not interact. Sometimes I'll feel called to tell others not to interact as well. It just depends. So in my opinion, what should you look out for in communities? Things like exclusivity, dog whistles, vilification, and confinement. You should also watch out for anything that matches the bite model of cult, but that's a different episode. If you want more information on the bite model, I'll leave that in the show notes. So when I talk about exclusivity in regards to community, I mean that the community is exclusive and you have to either follow very, very specific rules to get in, and not just rules like, be nice, no spam. If it's an in-person community, specific dress codes or anything like that. These would be very specific, often odd rules that maybe go against someone's beliefs or someone's personal boundaries. An exclusive community would also be one that doesn't welcome outsiders, or who does welcome outsiders, but only specific people are given room to speak and teach and make the rules, etc. My issue with communities that are entirely exclusive is that it has a narrow field of vision, and being involved in an exclusive community can sometimes feel like, you're involved in this particular community and it's exclusive and it's wonderful and you've been let in, so you can't go anywhere else. Exclusive communities also they tend to be narrow-minded. They don't allow for other beliefs. They don't always allow for discussion. They don't allow for questioning of authority. I don't tend to see a lot of this online, to be honest. I do know that there have been some experiences shared, like on Twitter, about communities in person who are kind of like this, where you have to follow their very specific, very weird rules, and whatever the leader of the community says goes no matter what. Nobody can question it. And that's just not a community that I want to be part of. And it's not a community that I want other people to be part of, because it's not a good experience. And I would never recommend that. The next red flag is dog whistles. So dog whistle is a phrase that's used to talk about terms and phrases, maybe even images, that aren't blatantly problematic, but they signal to other things that are problematic. So I'm trying to think of an example of this. Okay, so within Norse pagan communities, there is a group of people who are white supremacists. I just say it like that. And from what I understand, I'm going to leave links to Ocean Keltoy, Wolf the Red, and some other heathens and Norse pagans in the show notes so that you can get that information directly from them, because I don't want to misspeak. But there are certain people in the Norse pagan community who are folkists. And the phrase folkist, for me, in my experience, is a dog whistle to white supremacy, because these are people who think that only white people can practice Norse paganism, that white people should not be mixing with people of other races. It's very, very, very white supremacist and absolutely unacceptable. But the phrase folkist for me would be a dog whistle to just not interact with that community whatsoever. Maybe learn some more about it so I can be better educated on the community in general and what they accept and what they don't accept, so that I can then tell other people about it. There are so many different types of dog whistles that it's just ridiculous. Oh, another one that just popped into my head for transphobia would be woman. So this is going to be people who think that your magic comes from the womb and only those assigned female at birth, or those people who have a uterus and also identify as female, can practice magic. And they use the phrase woman, which is spelled like womb, WOMBENYN, whatever. When I see this word anywhere online, that's a big no-no for me to interact with that community. Not because I'm trans, but because I don't want to be involved in a community that would exclude trans women and people who don't have a uterus. I'm not trying to be part of an exclusive community that leaves people out. I don't want to cultivate a space that is exclusive to specific people and that does not include trans people and other people of the queer community. So that would also be a dog whistle for me. And you're never really going to know all of the dog whistles, and this is why it's important to have a well-rounded community, like I talked about earlier, because people in sub-communities that have experience with people bastardizing their practices or being like on the fringe of even their practice will have experience with what those particular groups use as dog whistles to signal to others like, hey, we're not going to say blatantly that we don't think trans women are women, but we're going to use this term so that if you know, you know, right? That is something that we want to avoid. So having, again, a well-rounded community and gaining those new perspectives and joining a community that has many sub-communities in it and listening to people in that community is important, so you can watch out for this red flag. The next one is kind of interesting because it's nuanced, and I do not have enough time in the day to go into absolutely every single thing of why this type of thing is nuanced. And this is communities that are quick to quote unquote cancel other people. And it also leads into the fourth one that I have written down here, which is no room for growth. And I have something else that I want to talk about with that. But a community who is quick to cancel other creators or other people that are online, I think is harmful and damaging to the entire community in general. And there's a few reasons why. So obviously, this is going to depend on situations. This is going to be a case-by-case basis. So please keep that in mind. I can't cover absolutely everything. And you can even tell that me trying to talk about this is making me nervous because I don't want to be like, oh, we're going to cancel Megan. She said something we don't like. I'm going to talk about cancel culture in the occult community probably in another episode because it's different, I think. Not necessarily different. It has its place. I'm not against cancel culture because cancel culture isn't just canceling people, it's holding people accountable for their actions and their words. However, when you have a community that gets together and they see someone doing something they don't like or that they disagree with, if that particular community is quick to jump the gun and speak out about that person and tell people they shouldn't follow them or they cancel them, basically, that's a problem. Because first of all, I think if it's the first occurrence, maybe the person just doesn't know, and maybe a private conversation would be more appropriate. Hey, like I talked about earlier, hey, you did this or you said this, and did you know that that's wrong because of this, or that's harmful because of this. If the person's like, yeah, I knew that, I don't see a problem with it, then maybe you can share that information with the community as a whole. But a community that is quick to speak out against other people without trying to go about it in a more practical or a more adult way by having conversations is harmful, because it can lead to people being afraid to speak out about other people, because the community that person has built up is quick to attack other people that attack the first person or that talk about the first person in a not so great way. I have books that I have wanted to review, that I have wanted to just talk about, that I won't talk about online in public because of the community around some of these authors. And it's nothing, it gets tricky. And it's hard to even talk about, because if we can't have these conversations, and if we can't talk about the things that are harmful in the community because we're afraid of backlash from people who follow authors and other creators and celebrities or, whoever, then we get stuck in a cycle of everybody's afraid to talk about stuff that they find harmful or that they disagree with, because some communities are quick to vilify others. And I don't want to cultivate a community where it's okay to bully other people online or in person, and because we know how people are. I have seen it firsthand in the community where someone does something, someone else doesn't like that thing, and then the person that doesn't like it talks about the experience or the situation because they have a platform, and then that person's fans, that person's followers go and attack the first person who maybe didn't even have control over the situation to begin with. And those people get death threats and they get doxxed, and then they go on private or they just disappear from social media altogether. And it's a real problem when these people get bullied off of platforms for things like that. Now, there are people who need to be held accountable and who should not have followings. I'm not saying that every specific person or every certain person, what am I trying to say? I'm not saying that every person that has a following doesn't deserve a following. Where was I going with that? Oh, I was on a roll and I lost it. Anyway, I'm not saying that the people who mess up and who don't take accountability for their actions deserve to have their following, because they don't. If someone can't take accountability for things that they have done and either apologize, make reparations, make a statement, then yeah, they probably don't deserve their following, because they're not holding themselves to those standards that most people would expect. I would expect that if I'm following somebody online and they mess up and somebody says, hey, you messed up, then they would turn around and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I was unaware. I messed up. How can I make this right? That's what I want in a community. That's what I'm trying to build in my communities that I have. And that is what I want to cultivate in any other community that I'm part of. Now, it goes into the next one, where if a community leaves no room to grow, it's not a community I want to be a part of. Now, there is a specific situation that I have in mind for this point, and it took place in a Discord server that I'm in. And basically, one person was saying something and they were incorrect, and other people stepped in to share their experiences and share their knowledge and try to help this person. And this person just wasn't having it. They just weren't. They were argumentative, they were defensive, and it just kind of got left at that for a minute. And then the person, after they took a break and they stepped back, they came back and they're like, you know what, I'm sorry. I let my ego get in the way. You all are right. I have learned from this. Thank you for helping to explain it to me. And then the other people that were originally involved in this came back and they said, hey, no problem. It's a learning experience. Let's grow from this. And what did you learn? And how are you going to move forward? And they used it as an experience for this person to grow in their practice. If a community cannot make room for growth, to make room for people to make mistakes, then it's not a community I want to be part of. Because no one is perfect. No one is going to get it right every single time, the first time, the 10th time, the 50th time. There has to be room to grow there. Otherwise, you're just going to stagnate. If you can't grow and learn more and become a better person, then what's the point? Now, obviously, there's also the caveat to this that if a person has particular patterns and nothing ever changes, no matter how many chances they've gotten, then yeah, I don't kind of want that person in my community because they have a pattern of behavior that I don't want in my community, that I don't want to cultivate. And they've gotten enough chances and eventually, you can only do so much. But if a community doesn't leave space for growth, I don't want it. Period. Now that that's all said and done, I'm sure I left things out. I'm sure there are many different reasons why community is important in occult spaces. Everybody is going to have their own thoughts and opinions on why community is important. Maybe you're in the broom closet and your community is your only way to interact with people who believe in similar manners that you do. Maybe you are like me and you have a podcast and a YouTube channel and you're growing a community around that for people that are like-minded or that have questions and want to learn about what I'm doing. There are many different reasons why community is important. There are also many different things to look out for in communities online and in real life, and there is absolutely no way that I could cover every single point in one particular podcast episode. But make sure that you check the links in the description. Check for the information from Ocean Keltoy, Wolf the Red, the Bite model if you want to learn more about how to identify a cult or cult-like behavior, because there are some communities that behave like cults and it's important to be able to identify them. But I don't have the entire education to speak about the Bite model. Maybe I'll do a further episode on that in the future or a blog post or something. But now that you've heard some opinions from me and some other people about why community is important and what to watch out for, get involved. Join communities that you feel welcome in. Join communities that cultivate a sense of inclusivity and safety and a judgment-free area. Join communities that allow you to grow and allow you to be who you are. Don't be shy about joining a community. The first step is actually doing it. My community is open if you would like to join my community. I have a Discord server that is fairly active. I also have a Facebook group that's not too active. I'm not generally on Facebook very much. I am going to try to be more active with that Facebook group. It's just not something that I use very much. If you don't have Discord or Facebook, you can follow me along on social media, leave comments, interact with me there. I do try to respond to every comment that I get. DMs do get more difficult because sometimes they get lost, especially if I don't follow you. They get put in a different folder. But just get involved. Find a way that you can get involved. I don't know if I can recommend getting involved in a community in real life outside of the internet right now because of COVID. If you feel safe and comfortable to do so, if you are fully vaccinated, then I can recommend it. Otherwise, be safe with your communities. And remember, if you're in any occult space and you're looking for community and friends, we're out there. You just have to say hello.